Hello and welcome back to this revised series on Python 4DH. In the last two videos, we looked at two kinds of data structures. We looked at tuples, which were made with open and a closed parentheses. We looked at a list, which is made with an open and a closed brackets, which is essentially a changeable tuple. And we even looked at a list that doesn't contain any duplicates, which was a set. And we made a set with these uh, with these open and closed squiggly brackets. And the way a set looked is it had a few certain characteristics. The first thing that it had was an item, so let's just say a name, and then it had a comma and then another name, so we're going to say name 2. Now, I know what you're thinking. I saw in a previous video that we use squiggly brackets to make a dictionary. And in fact, we do. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this video. And the way in which a dictionary is going to differ from a list in structure is that a dictionary does not have commas to separate the pieces in it. Instead, it uses a colon. And I'm going to talk about that right now. So a dictionary, we need to make one, is going to be formed by, let's just create an object called D. We're going to have an open and a closed squiggly bracket. And a dictionary is going to have two components, a key, and then we're going to have a colon and a value. Now, what this is doing is it's making two pieces of data explicitly relational. We are saying that the key is somehow intrinsically connected to a value. Why is this useful? Well, let's jump in with a real life example. So I'm going to go ahead and comment this out so I don't get an error. So what we're going to do is we're going to create two lists. We're going to have a list called names. And let's just throw a few names in here. We're going to say Jeff, Cindy, let's say Bob, and we'll say Anna. Okay, great. So we've got one piece of data. Now, this data is relational. This is a series of similar items. They're all names. But what if we wanted to make that data relational to some other piece of data? For example, ages. We can make another list. Let's say Jeff is 22. Let's say Cindy is 52. Bob is 70. And Anna is 43. So we've got two pieces of data here. We've got names and we've got ages, but there is nothing in these two lists that makes these two things explicitly connected. We have got Jeff and he's 22, Cindy and she's 52, Bob and he's 70, and Anna and she's 43, but nothing ties these two different data sets together. This is where a dictionary comes in. So let's go ahead and use this exact same example and make a dictionary. So we're going to make a dictionary and we're going to have two keys. We're going to have a key that is name, and we're going to make that equal to, let's just take the first example, Jeff. And then we're going to have another key, which we're going to separate with a comma, and that's going to be age, and that's going to be colon equal to 22. So what we have here is a dictionary with two keys, name and age, and two values, Jeff and his age, 22. So let's print off D and see what that looks like. And as you can tell, in our output, it looks the exact same. Now, dictionaries are probably one of the most important data structures in Python because they allow you to make data explicitly related to one another. Now, let's think for a second. How would we go through and actually create a dictionary for all of this stuff? We can't just put name, comma, Cindy and hope that that works. You'll get an error. And the reason why is it's syntax error because you can't delineate things like this. That's bad practice and it won't work. So how do you create a large dictionary that contains all of this information? The answer is not probably obvious. What you need to do is you need to make a list. Let's just call this list, let's just call it data. And we're going to make that equal to a list. And embedded within this list, we are going to have a dictionary. Now let's just print off data for right now. I'm going to go ahead and delete that so it doesn't print off. And as you can tell, when we print off data, we have a list, and embedded within it is a dictionary. But what's really cool is we can add other dictionaries in this list. So let's go ahead and do that. We can have, let me make this look a little nicer. Why not? Just leave it there. We can have that one there. And again, I'm just copying and pasting. Now I want to show something very important. The last item in your list cannot have a comma. If you do, let's try to print it off and show you what happens. You're going to have a few problems. It doesn't actually show a problem here for some reason. It usually returns an error. Not sure what's happening there. So anyway, oh, that's when you're doing a JSON construction. I apologize. I've been working with JSON files mostly lately, not data in Python. So for here, it doesn't matter at all. So we've got these four things repeated. Now let's just go through and copy and paste these names into the name section. And we can do that. And we can copy that age in there, that age in there, and that age in there. Now we don't really need any of that anymore. We're kind of done with it. Let's just comment it out so you can see it still. And we don't need that either. So what we have now is data. And this is why a dictionary is useful. You can structure a whole bunch of similar data, millions of these, in one simple list that has a common data structure. So why is this useful? Well, when I need to call this data, I can just call a single object. And so if we look here, data is a list. So if I wanted to grab the first item in the list, think to yourself, how would I do that? If it's a list of dictionaries, I'm going to call the first item in the list the same way that I would call any other item in a list. I'm going to index it with the square brackets open and close, and I'm going to say which position in that index I want to grab. So I want to grab the first position. What do you think is going to print off when I run this? Take a moment, pause the video, and think about that. Okay, let's run it. It prints off the first item in the list, just like I promised. Now, within this object, which is data indexed at 0, which is this first dictionary, we actually have some very important metadata. We've got, once again, the name and age of this guy here, Jeff. How do we grab this particular item? Well, the way in which we do that, let's create a new object. Let's create name1. We're going to make that equal to data 0. So if I wanted to figure out, let's just say, person 1. If I wanted to grab the information for person 1, I can print off person 1, open and a close bracket. And what we're going to do is something kind of like indexing for a list or a tuple, but indexing for a dictionary. And what we are going to do is we are going to say which keys value we want to grab. So if we want to grab the name Jeff, in here we are going to put the key of name. And it's important to make sure that it is a string. So an open and a close quotation mark. And now when I print that off, we get Jeff's name. And I can do the same thing. I go ahead and copy and paste this down for age. So if we run that, we'll get Jeff and 22. Why is this useful? Well, this is very useful when you're working with a lot of data that comes in CSV format, comma separated value, or something like an Excel format where you have rows of data. This is how we kind of process and handle it in Python. Now, there are going to be other ways in which we do this for more complex data, and that's going to be using a module called pandas, but we're not there yet. That's going to be a lot later in this series, and I have it slated for lecture number 29 when we start talking about more advanced Python libraries for how to handle code. But for right now, this is kind of similar to an Excel spreadsheet where you have a row that has the titles, so name and age, and then all of the different rows that correspond to that. So row number 1 would be Jeff, and column 1 would be Jeff, column 2 would be his age, which would be 22, etc. So this is how we can access that data. And as we start exploring more complex things like conditional statements in the next lecture and loops in the following one, you're going to see why structuring your data in this way is particularly useful because we can access it through for loops. Now, we're going to be working with dictionaries a lot more in future videos. This was just to give you a basic sense of how you create a dictionary, what they are useful for, how to clear a dictionary, and some of the key concepts like key and value. I highly recommend that you spend time and think about all the stuff that we talked about here. And what I recommend is that you go over to pythonhumanities.com and check out underneath part 2, you go down to which is data structures. Check out number 7, which is going to be on dictionaries. You can watch the video again. I'm going to be updating that as soon as I finish this series. And you can click on coding exercise after you read through if you need a reference point, and you can play around with the actual code there and follow this kind of coding exercise, and then you can check yourself with a cheat sheet. That's going to be it for this video, though. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, please like and subscribe down below and visit us at pythonhumanities.com.